we see Australian business.
Welcome back. You're watching The Contrarians, where I've been speaking to Julian Leeser and Hugh McDermott. I'm now joined by the man who vanquished Julian Leeser at the Bradfield pre-selection. Paul Fletcher, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter, and I'm very pleased to be here with my very good friend Julian.
Well, our viewers didn't get to see during the ad break, but at that stage, Julian was insisting on Hugh sitting between him and Paul. The tension in the room was just amazing.
You know,
if anyone had
let
seen
me just
it.
make the point that Julian and I came first and second in a pre-selection panel or contest.
That's not true. It was first daylight and then Julian came in at third.
With 17 people contesting a democratic pre-selection. There was no national executive making the choice. This was a democratic process in all of its beauty.
And tell me, like, you're right, it was democratic, but you make the point that you and Julian did so well in it and you came first and second. What does that say about people like David Coleman, for example, who ran in that seat, wasn't good enough to be within cooee of you two, yet he's going to, look by the looks of it, be a Liberal member of Parliament? It's very much a case of getting the second 11 in the marginal seats. Is that what it is?
It's a highly talented field, Peter. I mean, there were lots of good people in there. You know, I think when you look back at the Bradfield pre-selection, when David Connolly became member back in 1974,
that's right.
A lot of the people who were in that pre-selection ended up in federal and state parliament. You had people like Nick Greiner.
So Hugh, what Julian is saying, Julian says it was an incredibly talented field,
when was the last
of which I came second out of 17.
When was the last time the Labor Party had 17 people lining up for any pre-selection?
Oh, they have a lot more than that, but they just pick them behind the scenes. That's
no, that's not true. They were going pre-selection for just recently. No, why do you laugh? We had pre-selection just recently.
You're struggling to come up with
no, I'm trying to think of the name of the actual seat. Basically to replace Robert McCullen. Right, there was a pre-selection there last week.
The national executive
we've had and we will have a number of state seats that are going up for pre-selection over the next 12 months, and we've basically trialled primaries like they have in the US to see if that's a way of getting more and more of the community involved.
And you guys also went for some new fresh blood. When Mark Arbib left the Senate to fill the casual baseball team.
He put the one Senate. It was a big pool of talent there, and Bob got that. Now, the reality is that the Labor Party has a long history of basically going to rank and file pre-selections. There were times when the National Executive, has also been elected by the membership, so that's up there, and it basically decides it.
Five union officials sitting out of Chelsea's
I'm not sure there's a big...
I wish it was that simple.
I'm not sure that having the 17 do it is that good a result. If you've come second ahead of such outstanding people, would you agree, as Tom Switzer and David Coleman, Phil Senior, all fantastic candidates?
It was a very good field.
It was a very strong field.
The best man won.
If you do say so.
And I am confident that a significant number of the people who are in that pre-selection field will be in state or federal parliaments in years to come, and that'll be a very good thing.
Who do you think?
Oh, I would suggest there's probably several people in that field. I have every confidence that Julian will be serving our nation in some capacity or other in years to come, and I have that confidence about a number of people in the panel, and that's a great thing. And as Julian says, you know, there are plenty of examples you can look back at previous times where you've had these pre-selections where you've had a good group of people come together. And one thing that many people don't understand, you do feel a special bond with anybody you've been in a pre-selection with.
Not always, though, let's be honest, not always.
Special bond's a very interesting word for it, I have to say. I remember the good old Liberal pre-selection for Ross Cameron out at Parramatta back in the 90s. That was great. And,
when you were a Liberal Party member?
No, I was a Labor Party member in Parramatta at the time, and geez, that was a great choice. Lots of pool of talent there.
One last thing. Although Paul beat me in the pre-selection, I think he's doing a fantastic job as member for Bradfield, and that the party is lucky to have him with his knowledge about the NBN. I think he is the right man for the place. He is the right man for the place.
Would you have done a better job?
He deserved to win the pre-selection.
Julian would have done an excellent job because we are a party of individuals, and everybody brings their own capacities and talents.
This is getting sickening. Paul Fletcher, let me ask you now. We had the announcement during the week of the Coalition's policy on the NBN. It's been put to me by quite a few senior Liberals that the only two people in their own party that actually understands this are you and Malcolm Turnbull. So we've got you here to talk about it. Now, just first comparing it to 2010, the election where Tony Smith was only given $5 or $6 billion to be able to play with. And of course, Tony Abbott refused to be present for the announcement of the policy. Tony Smith went down like a shooting star after that. He's now in the PAL-Sec ranks, never to be promoted in all likelihood. What is going on here? Tony Abbott has basically sold him down the river in 2010, but he's got his act together this time with Malcolm Turnbull.
Well, I think if we can put the personalities to one side and focus on the policy, What we have now is a policy where the Liberal Party, Malcolm Turnbull, Tony Abbott have clearly committed to building a national broadband network. The Liberal Party has always strongly supported the notion of upgrading Australia's broadband infrastructure.
But you've also always said it should be on budget, and this is off budget. You must admit that there's got to be a bit of egg on the face there after having spent so many years saying that the NBN should be on budget, and now you guys, just like the Labor government, are keeping it off budget.
Well, I think the specific point we've made is that there's a set of public sector accounting standards which determine whether expenditure falls within what we all refer to as that headline surplus or deficit number. And the key principles are that it needs to be an investment where you have a confidence of getting a return. Now, the point we've made consistently is that NBN, under the configuration that Labor was pursuing, where they're going to be spending, we estimate quite conservatively, over $90 billion, it's very, very hard to see any plausible basis on which there would be a financial return. But the plan that we've got is spending much less capital. It's going to get the network rolled out much more quickly. Therefore, you're going to start getting a return more quickly. And so we think that the accounting treatment is justified. But the point we're making is the facts were very different with Labor's model.
Why is it, Julian, Lisa, and I'll come to you in a moment, Hugh, why is it, Julian, that the Liberal Party says that it can't cost its policies yet, we don't get those sort of details yet, it's prepared to cost Labor's NBN and put the figure at 90 billion, but it won't cost its own policies such that we have some details there? Well,
because you've got some public figures there about the NBN as it is now currently. I mean, the Liberal Party will cost its policies on the basis of PFO, the pre-election economic forecasts, which is traditionally, I mean, we don't even know what the budget's going to come out with in a couple of weeks' time, let alone how it'll be in September.
But how believable is it to get a $90 billion estimate? And don't get me wrong, like maybe that will end up being right, but how believable is it to get an estimate from an opposition that lacks the resources of government, yet at the same time be constantly told across a range of portfolio areas that we can't have costings details because we're not the government, we don't have accuracy to the bureaucracy?
But let's also make the point, Peter, this is an unusual kind of policy area where you have government effectively carrying out a business and engaging in a network rollout. There are plenty of comparables around the world. There are plenty of networks you can look at around the world, and there's also a reasonable amount of money, of information that's been disclosed by NBN Co as it goes on. Less than we think ought to be disclosed, but still a reasonable amount. Therefore, the methodology that we've used, that Malcolm and his team have used to come up with this estimate, draws on what the equity analysts are saying, for example.
But why can't we get that kind of costings detail on other coalitions' policies? Why do we only get it on Malcolm Turnbull's? Is he the only shadow minister up to the job at giving us that kind of detail?
No, it's because the nature of this venture, this is effectively a standalone business which government has decided is going to run. So there are plenty of market comparables for that, and there are equity analysts pursuing it. For example, in that analysis on the 90 billion, one of the components is that we don't think the revenue assumptions that are built into NBN Co's business plan are realistic.
Well, let me get a response to that, Hugh. I mean, you're listening to this. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that this is now a second policy that they've come up with on the NBN or on their equivalent. I mean, there's no proper costings. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that if they win the government in September, that they'll change it again. You know, it's...
Well, you're only, on that point, they're only doing a cost-benefit analysis after
the reality is the NBN is the best thing that's going to go, and it needs to go ahead if we're going to keep up with the rest of the world. And because we're falling behind as it is, you know, the reality is the NBN will have its issues, have its problems, but it's a far better policy.
Let's bear in mind, Labor took a policy to the 2007 election, which was to spend $4.7 million on a 12 megabit per second network. They then changed that because they mis-executed on their first policy. So that the criticism that somehow this is a change in policy, that's an odd criticism to be coming.
Well, you guys are going to spend $30 billion.
Yeah, I don't think it's an odd criticism at all, right? Now Turnbull's come up with a new policy, a new plan, a way of doing things. It's still got the copper network in there. It's still got stuff which is, you know, not comparable to other network systems throughout the world. I mean, it'll be another policy they'll probably dump after September if they win.
That is just wrong. That is just based upon a factual misunderstanding of what is being done in other networks around the world.
Well, can I ask you about these factual... What about the fact there's going to be 60,000 refrigerator-sized nodes randomly put in front of people's houses?
Let me just finish the
around the country.
First, and I'll come to that. In the US, you've got two companies, Verizon and AT&T, two major fixed-line telcos. One of them chose to go fibre to the premises, one of them chose to go fibre to the node, and one of the key points commercially is that the actual amount of money that people are choosing to pay them each month is very little different. If you look at what's being done by British Telecom, they are pursuing a fibre to the node strategy, and one of the key points here is that the technology has evolved very substantially just in the last 3, 4, 5 years. So the major vendors, the Alcatels, the Huaweis, all of these major telecoms equipment manufacturers have been greatly increasing the capacity of fibre to the node. Now, why is that? That is because telcos around the world are saying to build a fibre to the premises network is enormously expensive, and the experience suggests that not that many people are prepared to pay for the fibre all-the-way service. A subset, a small proportion of people are, but if you look at serving the mass market, the commercial evidence suggests that fibre to the node is a much better fit with what consumers are prepared to pay for.
All right, no, hold that thought. Julian, you want to jump in again? You've got to be quicker than that. We've got to go to a commercial break. Our New Zealand viewers are going to get their New Zealand news now. I understand that New Zealand is actually switching from fibre to the node to fibre to the home, but we'll discuss that when we get back. New Zealand's too busy actually changing from the Coalition's policy to the Labor Party's policy, but they'll be getting news after this. We'll be back in a moment.
LG's first ever true steam dishwasher creates high temperature steam to naturally loosen tough baked-on stains, reducing the need to pre-wash or scrub. To have almost everything under control. Buy a LG now and get 6 months free finish.
Inspired by Asian cooks, new Maggi Stir Fry Creations has a unique two-step process with an infusion paste to seal in the flavours and a finishing sauce to complete the final dish. Discover the secret to a real stir fry.
When I was made redundant, it was a real shock. I didn't know what I'd do.
I've just never pictured you in a suit. A uniform, maybe?
Fortunately, I had Virgin Income Protection, so I'm covered when I can't work. It doesn't just protect you for sickness and injury, there's optional cover for redundancy too.
Not bad at all.
It means we can pay the bills and I'm still looking after my family while I work out my next move.
When can you start?
Virgin Income Protection provides cover for day-to-day expenses if you're unable to work due to sickness or injury. Unlike most other insurers, it also provides optional cover for involuntary redundancy, and cover starts from $1 a day. Just call 1340
Thanks to Virgin Income Protection, when I lost my job, my family didn't need rescuing.
But I might.
See how you and Virgin Income Protection could be good together. Call 1340
Fall for new strawberries and cream bliss. Strawberry flavoured jelly on a creamy vanilla base with a luscious fruity centre.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, Dad, you're all heart.
New from the Natural Confectionery Company.
Brighten your world with Airwick Aqua Mist. Its water-based mist freshens the air and your fabrics. Airwick Aqua Mist. Something in the Airwick.
At Sage, we have over 6 million customers, and that makes us a leading global supplier of business management solutions for companies with up to 1,000 employees. Like Sage CRM, our web-based business process and sales management solution, tightly integrated with our ERP products and deployable on-premise or in the cloud. With credentials like these, we must be doing something right, so call us on 13 Sage.
Welcome back. You're watching The Contrarians. We will continue with the panel in a moment, but first, let's take a look at what is making news with Lee Hatcher.
Peter, unions have criticised Woodside Petroleum's decision to scrap its plans for a controversial $45 billion LNG plant in Western Australia. The company says the James Price Point plan isn't commercially viable and is reviewing alternative concepts. West Australian Premier Colin Barnett says it would be a tragedy and a missed opportunity if the Browse gas project is not developed at James Price Point. Shares in Woodside surged on the news, up 3.2% to $36.40. Julia Gillard has unveiled a $40 million plan to target crime hotspots. Sourced from the proceeds of crime, $10 million will go to youth outreach programs and $30 million to surveillance and lighting in crime hotspots. The Prime Minister made the announcement during a visit to Macquarie Fields in Sydney's West, saying she's confident the money will make a difference. The acting opposition justice spokesman, Scott Morrison, says the plan is a copy of the Coalition's crime prevention policy launched last year. Holden appears set to keep a promised $50 million in South Australian government funding, despite a decision to axe 400 jobs by August. Premier Jay Weatherill held talks with Holden today. He confirmed his government remains committed to providing Holden with $50 million for the development of 2 new models between 2016 and 2022. But any additional funding is now uncertain. The state government and the company will again meet in the coming weeks to thrash out a new agreement. The Northern Territory government's announced landmark reforms aimed at tackling alcohol-fuelled violence. Under the proposed legislation, those found to be drunk 3 times within 2 months will be referred to a tribunal and will face up to 12 weeks of mandatory rehabilitation. Treatment centres will be established in Darwin, Alice Springs, Katherine and Nhulunbuy. Treatment may include participation in therapeutic alcohol and drug programs, life skill programs and aftercare programs to assist people when they are discharged. US Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived in Seoul for crisis talks. Tension is continuing to mount on the Korean Peninsula, with intelligence reports indicating another missile test could be imminent. The talks are expected to cover the security situation and how to cope with North Korea's ongoing threats. And in sport, Essendon's James Hird has hit back at calls by the AFL chief for him to consider stepping down over the club's ongoing drug scandal. Andrew Demetriou made the comment following reports Hird was injected twice by former sports scientist Stephen Dank. The besieged coach is in Perth for his side's crucial match against Fremantle tonight and denies he'll be quitting as coach. Tomorrow's forecast: rain in the east, mostly sunny in the southeast and showers in the south. And Peter Jacinta Tyner will be back with more news, top of the hour.
Thanks very much for that, Lee. I'm joined here by the man who vanquished Julian Leeser at pre-selection, Paul Fletcher.
Paul has so many more distinguished titles than that.
Oh, but that was one that I took personal heart in. Julian Leeser joins us as well, and Hugh McDermott.
Personal joy, Dave.
Let me ask you, Paul, I know that you watch the show religiously each week. You would have seen last week that I was having a bit of a crack at soccer. I reckon it's a boring game, you know, nil-all results. Do you agree with that? Like, it's just rubbish.
I disagree. I'm a big fan of soccer, and I think it's got to have a growing place in Australia. I went to a Western Wanderers match just 6 weeks ago and I was amazed by
why bother? It's just
because
it's so
of the
hopeless.
Amazing mood in the ground.
Oh, the mood! When they're lighting flares and
the high quality of play. And I think it's great that we've got a diversity of codes. I think I'd like to see soccer become
quality of play. The Australian League
become ever stronger.
It's a hopeless league in comparison to other ones around the world. Why would you bother?
Well, I think that's where I disagree with you.
Obviously, congratulations to Foxtel on the rights.
I think it is quite noticeable that the standard of play, if you go back to the old Phillips Soccer League of whenever that was, 20 or 25 or even 30 years ago now probably, the standard of play has gone up very markedly. And that, you know, they're competing in a tough market against a bunch of other codes.
But it's just so boring. Like, the game is just so boring. Hugh, you agree?
Look, I'm a rugby league fan, right? Yeah. You know, and AFL as well. Unfortunately, it hasn't been a good year for me. I'm an Eels supporter and a Giants supporter, but I'm from Western Sydney, so at least we're winning things in the soccer.
Soccer players,
you know, but
soccer
to be
players
honest,
fall over and they act like they've just broken a leg. I mean, it's embarrassing.
Peter, when was the last time you played competitive sport?
Oh, look, contact sport is the one that I've focused on most of my life.
I agree with you. Contact sport is much more important. But
I agree with Paul. The league has improved. And we're attracting people who've played overseas now.
People that have got nothing left in the tank, so they come over here. and they become the all-star player of the season.
That's not people like Harry Kuehl and others. I mean, they've got some outstanding soccer players.
I think the thing you can't really fail to be impressed by is just the passion of the fans. There's a huge commitment there. I think it's terrific.
And there's an ethnic diversity among the fans too. I mean, that don't necessarily get involved.
That's all great, but the game's rubbish. But we'll move on. We'll move on.
You'd be in a minority in the globe who thinks that.
Well, yeah, maybe, but you know, majority's not always right, Julian. It's not about following the herd.
I think you need to go to.
It's not about following the herd.
Peter, just because they don't play soccer in Vaucluse doesn't necessarily.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Man living on the sunny northern beaches of Sydney. Always has. In fact, you used to live in the eastern suburbs. What are you talking about? Bellevue Hill?
No, I don't live on the northern beaches, Peter.
Oh, well, you live on the North Shore. You know,
it's all the same. Other parts of
you were going to move into the Bradford area and then you moved on.
All the same to you, Peter.
We're going to move on. We're going to move on. High-speed rail, something that we can all agree to attack. Maybe not you, Hugh. You might try to defend it. 45 years. That's a pretty reasonable turnaround, don't you reckon, to build a bit of a rail link between Sydney and Melbourne? What do you reckon?
Yeah,
45 years. I mean, it's
give or take 5 years. Probably. I mean, unless medical science advances, but it's a long time. 45 years.
We'll all be flying around in hovercraft by the time they finish it.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's a great idea. I mean, we need something like that, but how realistic the proposal is, you know. But it's just like the stage. It's so early.
45 years
demonstrates there's no economic case for it, essentially. I mean, the choice is high-speed rail or airlines, and essentially the airlines have the market at the moment. And you know, there may come technology in the future where they can make it economically viable, but with our low-density population, it's very unlikely.
Well, I saw a report saying that it's amazing the times that this high-speed train will be able to do. You'll be able to go from Sydney to Melbourne in, wait for it, 3 hours. Incredible stuff. I was watching that report from the Qantas Club about to take my hour-long flight to Melbourne.
But of course the business proposition is when you look at the end-to-end travel time, it's a competitive proposition.
That's right.
And in fairness, there is quite a lot of detailed analysis in the report of that. And if you look at the share of traffic that has gone from airlines to high-speed rail in Europe, it's very impressive.
But it shouldn't take 45 years,
as Julian says, the challenge is the low population densities and the long distances in Australia. So the capital cost is very, very substantial. I thought the report was not a bad piece of work, and I thought it was useful that you have a reasonably detailed planning exercise and you have detailed economic analysis, including a cost-benefit analysis that lets policymakers make an informed decision.
Well, that's why you guys for your NBN should have done that before announcing your policy, not after.
I think there's quite an interesting contrast between the two policy processes, and it is a great shame that we hadn't seen the same careful, measured public policy process with the NBN as we've seen with high-speed rail. Look, my own view is, like a lot of people, I'm a bit of a train nut. I'm not in the Tim Fisher category.
Like a lot of people. Who are all these train nuts?
Tim Fisher.
I think there are a lot of people around who like the idea of high-speed rail. I have to say I like the idea.
But I think the interesting point...
It's hard to get past the economics.
But exactly. I mean, Hugh, at a national level, what this does, if we are to believe the cost and the time frame that's been discussed, it's just it highlights the difficulty of infrastructure development in a country as large as ours geographically, with a smaller population base.
And that's the issue. I mean, it comes, like you're absolutely correct, it comes down to the economics of it. Now, I believe there's something like 3 million flights or something around those figures in Melbourne, Sydney, around that time. It's huge, right? That's right. So I think that we really need something like a high-speed train, whether it's something that can happen within 40 years. I'm pretty sure as technology advances it can. That the report talks about tunnelling underneath Sydney, a vast area, 30 kilometres, something like that. They don't do that overseas. They use viaducts and things like that. So, I mean, we perhaps need to readapt that. Also, I think, but another thing, before any of that goes ahead, we need to really seriously have a look at the airports in Sydney as well. Now, there's the argument of having the second airport, but we should also look at perhaps extending the flight times and also the other parts of the Mascot Airport already now. So
the other interesting thing is that I always thought that the main part of the route that could be economically viable was Newcastle Central Coast to Sydney, and there's no sense in there that would be a priority in terms of the route.
About almost turning Sydney into a mega city.
Well, it turns out that the economics are very heavily dependent upon the premium fares you can charge for the long distance, so airfare type levels. And the point Julian makes is that comes out quite strongly in the report, that you can only charge commuter-type fares for a trip from Newcastle or the Central Coast into the city and so into Sydney. So that you're not going to make the economics work on the commuter business, even though there's a significant, obviously,
but is that where there's a role for government? Because if you can't make the economics work in a business sense, maybe you can make them work by government assistance. I'm wondering if that's too much like big government. Government assistance to improve the productivity of the connections.
That's how trains in Australia have always been.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm suggesting. Maybe you can fit the same model.
And I think we'd probably all agree that this is a classically in the zone where it's not a viable private sector business. You won't get a commercial rate of return. So the public policy question becomes, if you put the capital in, do the benefits, the revenues earned, but also the time savings, the regional economic development benefits justify the cost? Now, the report is quite marginal on whether they do.
Hugh McDermott, more car manufacturing job losses in this country are on the way. Are we just throwing good money against bad by continuing to subsidise this dying industry, which, as a former head of Ford, former president of Ford, warns the end of car making is inevitable, in his view, in this country?
I don't agree with that. I don't think it's inevitable. There are problems. No, he knows a great deal, but the reality is that the Australian car manufacturing industry is vitally important. There are tens of thousands of jobs linked to it, not just directly at Holden and Ford, but also and others, but also linked in through suppliers and other roles.
You can't prop it up if it's a dead industry.
Yeah, but I mean, the money that's gone towards the industry, hasn't been as excessive as people like to paint that picture when we look at what the long-term benefits are. And I think that in Australia we need to support our manufacturing industries. For many, many decades we did. Even during the 80s and 90s when we were globalising, some industries disappeared, and they probably needed to because we could never make them competitive.
But this is now another one that needs to, apparently.
Well, I think there are still reforms to go. There are still things that they need to do to be competitive on a world market, and I believe they should be supported to do that.
Jack Nasser is saying, I mean, this is a guy who ran Ford not only in Australia but globally, that we're not giving them enough money. I think the public has a low tolerance for the automotive industry regularly coming to government and say, we need a bailout, we need a bailout. At some point, a government's going to need to make a tough decision about...
What's your view? Do you think that Abbott should make the tough decision?
I don't know if it's today or tomorrow that it should happen, but it's clear that the industry is not going to survive long term and that there'll need to be some structural adjustment.
Do you agree with that? Would you like to see yourselves and Tony Abbott come into government and just slash assistance for car makers?
Well, Peter, you won't be surprised to hear I'm not going to be announcing policy in relation to support.
But Julian Leeser, your vanquished opponent, was prepared to offer strong views, and yet you're now part of the team, and you're giving me this mealy mouth. You're not prepared to say what you think.
I think the point I'm making is that the current government has put a lot of money into the car industry, and they really need to demonstrate the benefits that they're getting in exchange for that.
I agree with that, but I do believe that in an Abbott government, the industry would be gone.
Well,
I don't believe they will be given that support like the Labor government has.
Well, the Labor government gave Toyota. The Labor government gave Toyota a big wad of money to make a more environmentally friendly car that they were already making overseas. I mean, it's just crazy. Some of the handouts
just to be clear, I mean, we have repudiated various scare stories on the question of are we going to engage in major slashing of assistance to the car industry. We've made that clear. That's not right.
Say that again.
We have repudiated various scare stories on are we going to be engaging in major slashing.
But you need to, is my point, and that's what Julian agrees with.
Well, I was making the point that Jack Nasser has made.
You're doing that for politics reasons, I reckon, because you want to win seats in South Australia.
I was making the point that Jack Nasser has made that, we've got somebody who's very senior in the automotive industry, who knows the industry extremely well, saying the industry is not viable, and saying that, the only way to make it viable is to give it more money. And I think that there's a public question about whether that is broadly good public policy anymore today. Now, when the point comes where you actually say you draw your losses, you start a structural adjustment package to move people out of the car industry, that's not a matter for me. I don't have all the facts in front of me, but you have to listen to a man like Jack Nasser, who's had the level of experience he has.
I agree, you have to, but the Liberals aren't listening. They should slash and burn the industry because that's what needs to happen to it. Only, you can't thrive in a sector that is dying in this country. We're going to take a commercial break. Your tweets and emails when we come back. You're watching The Contrarians.
Everybody knows we've got another federal election looming. That means promises will be flying everywhere. But how are they going to be paid for? Already there's noises that the money will come from mining. That's a really dumb idea. The mining industry already pays more than $20 billion in taxes and royalties a year. $20 billion. Canberra should be out there trying to help grow mining, not mucking around with it. Tax mining too heavily, and projects go to other mining countries where taxes are lower. When projects go, jobs go. When Canberra gets greedy, Australians everywhere, now and in the future, are the losers. It's never been more important. Keep mining strong.
Authorised by M. Hook, Minerals Council of Australia, Canberra.
Hi there, Kitty from Progressive Car Insurance. Here to let you know that we're 100% online, which means less overheads for us and more savings for you.
Ready to save? Visit progressiveonline.com.au.
Cadbury Dairy Milk Marvellous Creations.
Let's see how Robin's gone with Activia and the TLC plan.
I'm actually starting to feel the difference. And Activia tastes great. I can't pick a favourite. I feel like I'm getting my drive back. And look, leggings, and they're not even tied around my tummy. I feel amazing. And that old bloated feeling I thought was normal is gone.
With its bifidus acta regularis culture, Activia yogurt can help improve digestive discomfort.
See what a little Activia and TLC can do for you.
Activia. Don't forget some breakfast.
With 5 whole grains and 4 hours of sustained energy release, Belvita breakfast biscuits are specially designed for breakfast. Try new cranberry. Find us in the biscuit aisle.
The Target mid-season sale is on now, with 20 to 40% off slippers and boots for the whole family, and 30% off knitwear for the whole family. Exclusions apply. See in-store. These fantastic mid-season sale offers available in-store and online at target.com.au.
I'm looking for a provider who gives me everything I need to trade Forex in one place.
I want customisable charts developed for Forex traders, transparent prices and a stable platform.
I want a provider that presents me with Forex trading opportunities 24 hours a day.
That's why I trade Forex with IG, Australia's #1 Forex provider.
Welcome back. You're watching The Contrarians, where I'm joined by the man who vanquished Julian Leeser at pre-selection, Paul Fletcher, Julian Leeser himself and Hugh McDermott. Keep your tweets and emails coming. A lot of Hugh hate out there, Hugh. If Labor told Hugh McDermott that the sky was green, he would support that view without question.
No, I don't support anything green, thanks very much.
And then I've got another one here that says, good intelligent panel today, PVO. Except for that Hugh.
Hey.
So not too much support for you there. Broadband, the panel is talking too much sense. Get more crazy right-wingers so that I can start yelling at the TV again. I don't know what that says about you guys. Are you defending the party line enough, or are you just not crazy?
I like to think we're not crazy.
Or not doing both, in your view, in terms of the car policy, because you were breaking ranks. Paul Fletcher was right on message about that, even though Tony Abbott clearly should slash and burn.
Well, that's an interesting view, Peter.
Well, you're a Thatcher supporter. You'd love it. Destroy the whole industry.
No.
Put thousands and thousands of workers
I'm pleased you raised Margaret Thatcher, because we never got to talk about her foreign policy and how good she was in the Falklands and ending the Cold War.
Relentless, Julia Leeser. You should have been born in Britain. McDermott wouldn't like anyone who's not part of the unions, was what one of our viewers said about you in relation to Margaret Thatcher.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, we didn't get enough time to talk about Thatcher and the Cold War, and I think it's really important to her main point.
Do answer this one, because Luke has tweeted in and said, Peter, remind everyone that Thatcher, quite seriously, I'd be interested in your response to this, that Thatcher supported apartheid and dictators like Pinochet. It confirms what Carr said about her. Of course, the foreign minister, not quite so diplomatically, made the point that she made a racist comment to him. He obviously won't be attending her funeral.
Thatcher didn't support apartheid. That's the first thing to say. She tried to bring the South Africans around to. Well, she tried to. She didn't think sanctions was the right way to end apartheid. I think that's the important thing. As for Pinochet,
before you go to Pinochet, she did call Mandela a terrorist.
Well, he was a terrorist. The ANC were an organisation. It's the reason Amnesty International never supported the ANC.
But was he a terrorist or a freedom
fighter?
fighter?
Because the ANC would not renounce terrorism. That's the key point. But on Pinochet, it plays more into Thatcher's view of the Cold War generally. You needed to take a very strong line against communism, particularly against the Soviet bloc countries.
Right,
Pinochet was part of that cordon sanitaire against the communist left.
I just want to ask Paul Fletcher a very comfortable question. Do you agree with Julian that Nelson Mandela was a terrorist?
Well, let me first say something about Margaret Thatcher. One of the interesting things about Margaret Thatcher was that...
No, that's not my question. My question is, do you agree, with Julian, Lisa, that Nelson Mandela was a terrorist?
Well, as you've seen, Julian and I don't run a unity ticket necessarily on every issue.
Well put.
And back to just finish making the point about Margaret Thatcher.
All right,
she was a science graduate, and when we're all talking, public policy people are talking, as we should, about the importance of STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, maths, she was an early leader who had that background.
And now another one, we've only got 1 minute on program. Hugh, let me ask you about high-speed rail. We had a tweet come in and say, oh, please, not more fast train talk. Australians need more airports and planes are quicker anyway.
I agree. I think we need to extend the times, the fly-in times at Mascot. We need to increase the runways. We need to consider maybe a second airport, either at Wilton or perhaps Badgerys Creek.
Definitely Badgerys Creek.
Well, I don't think Badgerys Creek myself. I'm opposed to it there, but we need to think about that, and that's realistic. I mean, the fast train, it's great, but, you know, it's a long way away yet.
All right, we're out of time. Gentlemen, one and all, thank you for your company. Paul Fletcher, the man who vanquished Julian Lisa at pre-selection. Julian Lisa, the man himself. And Hugh McDermott, thank you one and all for your company. And thank you for your company on this particular episode of Contrarians as well. Be sure and tune in on Sunday for Australian Agenda, where I'll be interviewing Bob Carr, the Foreign Minister, amongst other things, ask him about those rather inflammatory comments he made about Margaret Thatcher. See you then.